You don't have to understand it. Here's to whatever puts a smile on your face. Whatever makes you happy, people.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to HyperDoc Hangouts on Air, Tuesday afternoon chit chat. I'm Kelly Hilton, and I'm here with Lisa Highfill and Sarah Landis. And we are so excited to chit chat today with the amazing Steve Wick. That introduction song was one of his favorite songs, and I love the lyrics already. Whatever puts a smile on your face. And that's what we're going to be talking about today when we're sharing best practices, teaching, instruction, HyperDocs, what's working, and how we can continue to cultivate curiosity, creation, and community really around instructional design. So Steve has been a teacher for over 20 years. He has a master's in education and educational leadership and educational technology. He serves as a technology coordinator and science teacher and specialist. And this is such a treat that we're going to get to chat with you. So thanks for being here today, Steve.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
So Steve, we have noticed that you are just everywhere online with all of your sharing. And if you're watching live right now, please check out his links. They're in the YouTube below and everything is linked. And he's created a lot of amazing lessons to share. Tell us what's working for you right now as a HyperDoc designer.
Sure. The great thing about HyperDocs is the creation piece for me. That's really what I love about doing the HyperDocs is finding ways to blend in your content with, as anybody that's doing HyperDocs knows, with the 4 C's of collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. So I just love the challenge of finding cool resources, cool ideas, things that are interactive for the kids to get them engaged in the learning, not just to walk them through the steps, but to actually inspire their curiosity. And I teach mostly high school seniors, and they've played the game of education long enough that they're only curious about what I want them to know or what I should tell them to know. So it usually takes me about half a semester, which is what I love about HyperDocs, to flip that script on them a little bit and get them to actually think about inquiry. And okay, he only took me here. Where do I go now? And then I get to be part of that learning experience with them. And what I love about it too is it's not just me filling their heads. There's that old saying, do we fill the bucket or do we build the muscle? You know, we could talk for hours about growth mindset versus fixed mindset for those. I love that idea of how can we learn together and modeling that with the kids. And, you know, I can throw every cliche out there about failure and trying again and retakes and all that fun stuff. But it's fun to do that with the kids where I can actually interact with them in small groups as opposed to me just teaching AP environmental science. It's usually lecture. You tell them everything and they frantically write it down. That's what the kids want. That's the game they would love to play because it's easy for them. And they just think if they memorize what I tell them, they're good, as opposed to going out and kind of figuring out what they need to know, which is a lot of what I do in HyperDocs. And then we come back to it and we figure out, okay, did you actually find what you needed to know? No. Okay, well, let's move in this direction and see if we can get you somewhere else. So that, for me, that's what works, is that it's always a little different. It's always that chance to go in another direction at any given moment based on what you're getting from that group of kids.
For sure. Absolutely. I love how you're mentioning too, just being a high school teacher and being an AP high school teacher, that I'm assuming a lot of your students are just in that mindset of working for the grade. And so the HyperDoc can kind of help, and you're really helping them to push back on that. It's really for the learning. So you've shared a handful of resources with us. Are there one of those that you might want to talk us through that you can talk about how you've used that to differentiate for your different learners?
How about we jump in the Reboot the Noggin one, because that's always one of my favorites, because I completely get out of my science curriculum in that one. For the most part, I still have my science mindset in there a little bit, but we do those about anywhere between 4 and 8 times a year, depending on the group of kids. So this is Reboot the Noggin. This was one that I actually did at the beginning of this year. And we saw a bunch of people in the Facebook community do something similar with the one word and different things like that. And there's a lot of, like, when you look at this initially, like, oh, they're doing all this. There's a lot of interaction with me as we go through this one here too for those. But I really wanted to bring the kids back from break, just getting them thinking about where we've been and where we're going, because a big part of our second semester is about future of the planet for those. But I wanted to make it a little bit more personal for them. So you can see that I just went through and used one of the templates here for those things and went through step by step and just kind of got them looking at a couple of different things, got them creating, we got them collaborating for those types of things. I wanted them to share what's motivated. I always enjoy their motivational videos because most of the time it's either movie quotes or somebody yelling at you really loud. So I'm always like, all right, good. Okay, why did this motivate you? And for those right there. And then just try to bring some of those tools in that I wanted them to explore. I wanted them to take a look at Google Earth again. We hadn't been in there for a while. And then I love reflection. All my HyperDocs have some kind of reflective piece. So Flipgrid, if you're not using that or haven't used that, and to recap, that's another great doc, but Flipgrid is incredible. Mm-hmm. So you can be able to click on that because I was finding randomly that the random people were posting in there. As I would share this stuff, people that didn't really know how Flipgrid works would be doing these test Flipgrids. It was actually funny a couple of times. We're in there going, I'm test. And I'm like, my kids are watching, looking at it because the kids see all that. And they're like, who's this lady? I'm like, I don't know who that lady is. So we decided second semester, as much as I like to share everything, to close our Flipgrid so just my kids can get into there with that password for those. But I highly recommend Flipgrid. I have a couple professional development Flipgrids out there that you can actually see what's going on in there for those. But the ones that are in my class now, those ones I've kind of closed just for that reason. The kids were having a little bit too much fun with these poor teachers that were just in there trying to figure out how it worked, and they started recording themselves. And I don't think they knew they were recording themselves. You know, I didn't catch anybody picking their nose, but it was entertaining.
I was sure give them a good laugh, those high schoolers.
Yes.
That is so fun. So when you're teaching from that HyperDoc, were you how long did that take? Were you going back and forth through each step? And did you design this all at once and it looks like this? Or is this something that kind of took some time? Are there parts of this lesson that you've done over the last few years? I mean, you're obviously a very experienced teacher as well.
Some of the ideas were in there. That one was a completely new one this year. You know, I do a lot of the reboots with curiosity and things like that. I was just like, I've been looking at that. The idea came from the whole one word. What's your one word for 2018 instead of resolutions? I know Sean did a really nice one with that he shared with people and a couple other people in the Facebook community. And I was like, okay, well, I want to do a little bit more than the one word, but that was kind of our theme. Like we had a couple of videos and presentations that we did building into it. It took about 2 days. I kind of was thinking that was about what it's taking. I've gotten pretty good at figuring out how long HyperDocs take. Every once in a while, one surprises me because the kids get engaged. And then if they get engaged, I let them go. But most of the time, my kids are pretty consistent. And here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do it for that. So, and that one was completely from scratch. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to do one with the framework. I hadn't done one from one of the frameworks on the Teachers Give Teachers site on the HyperDoc.co site. So I was like, I want to use one of those to start with. And then I'm going to structure that one a little bit more. And then I just really wanted to see what the kids were going to do. And they were good in most of it. They struggled a little bit with the avatar creation for those kinds of things. One of the things we're really struggling with now is them creating memes. You know, that was a thing that I just started this year a little bit and getting them to create some memes. And one of the other HyperDocs has a meme activity. They much prefer to go and find them and copy them from the internet than make their own. So that was one of those pieces that was in there here. Yeah, this is the meme activity here. So we've done this twice now this year. I haven't completely figured out what's the best way to do it. But if you kind of scroll down, I give them a little intro. We talk about this. This is actually like this next slide, slide 3 there. That is not a good slide. But this wasn't a presentation. The kids actually got a copy of this. And this is their HyperDoc. I did it in slides, which I like doing sometimes just because of the visual appeal you can add to it for those. And I wanted to kind of model that for them, for those. So we talked a lot about what it should and shouldn't have and those types of things. And I'm still struggling with the idea that they are so much more focused on the funny than they are on the content. So we struggled a lot with that so far in both of those. But I kind of narrowed it down. The first time I kind of didn't give them a lot of templates and things like that. The second time that we did it, I kind of gave them those templates. A lot of them did like that Google Drawing meme generator, which off the top of my head, I just forgot who made that, but it's on there when you go and make a copy of it. Yeah, if you go and make a copy of it. Acres. Incredible Google Drawing template that's super easy for anybody to make a meme. You know, you look for these generators and you can't use them because there's so much inappropriate content on there, or it's blocked by your school's web filter or whatever. I was looking for things.
Really good idea.
I created a couple of my own, but then I stumbled on that one and I was like, that's awesome. And then I'm a big fan of Adobe Spark too. Adobe Spark's a great tool that's open at most schools for creating those memes or those quick little graphics or things like that.
Oh my gosh, this is so fun. So how do you get them to move beyond the content and or get to the content and move beyond the funny when they are pretty much like that's getting their buy-in really to the assignment? What's your secret for that?
You get them to share it. you've been anywhere, they always talk about authentic audiences. And that's the trick with the kids too and with them too. So we use Padlet all the time to share. Okay, you're not making this for me. You're not making it for yourself. You're going to put it in here. So the kids actually get on each other. They're like, yeah, I just saw that one. Why did you put that one in there? You didn't make your own for those. And then I have a lot of one-on-one conversations with it. Like, okay, like I'll go through, and I don't spend too much time up on the computer, but I'll either have my Chromebook and I'll move around with it a little bit, or I'm always behind kids looking at their screens. Not because I'm trying to catch them. I think that's what they think I'm trying to do, but because I'm curious about what they're doing. And it's so hard sometimes to capture that when you've got all the kids in different places in a HyperDoc. That is a challenge sometimes. So I'll talk to them about it. So I have a lot of little, I love kneeling down next to the kids in their desks. Even with high school kids, getting below them is so much more powerful. They'll talk to me. When I'm standing above them, they're not as likely to talk to me. So that's the trick, and just talking to them about it. And some of the kids don't. Some of the kids, ultimately, my final thing is, hey, if that's what you got and that's what you're going to do, then that's your learning experience. I don't think that you're on the best learning pathway right there, but that's where you're going to be. So you make the choice. If you're just going to make 3 copies of somebody else's memes and not actually engage in it, well, then that was your choice. And I'm not a big fan of grades, so they usually end up doing fine anyway, so I can't penalize them in that way. But I catch up to them on a formative or a summative assessment. I'm like, okay, this is where we did this, and this is where you didn't get it. Why? Oh, well, let's go back and look. So a lot of little small mini conferences throughout the day. When I do a HyperDoc, I'm tired more than when I lecture. I can lecture and just talk. When I do a HyperDoc on, and my rooms aren't real big for space when I have 30 kids in there, it's I'm climbing over backpacks and diving under desks and moving around a lot. And by the time I teach the 2 periods in a row that I teach, and I'm not complaining, I only teach the 2 periods. I sit on a computer way too much of the rest of the day. I'm tired.
Yeah. Sounds like I could just be in your classroom, walking around constantly, squatting down, talking to kids, setting new goals, giving them feedback, consistent feedback, whether it be not on the doc. Really, it's alleviated you being in the front of the room. You're really guiding them through their learning and having those mini conversations. And that's something that sounds like the HyperDoc's been allowed, giving you the space to do that. When you are designing these, we talked a little bit before about your goal, so that high school students and their motivation and keeping them motivated, so that it's not just assigning something and having them finish it to the end result. So how do you do that in your lesson design? Keep them engaged and make sure that they're not just checking off each little task and moving on and then I'm done.
So for me, and when you look at some of the HyperDocs that I've shared and stuff like that, they're in isolation. It is hard to show that with a HyperDoc because I'm constantly interrupting them. We do things called uncomfortable moments where they have to stand up and say something. We do give ones, get ones where they have to move around and talk to somebody different. I'll stop and we'll do a quick, lately I've been a big fan of Pear Deck. So we'll stop and I'll put a prompt up on the screen and they then respond for whatever our daily agenda. They respond through our daily agenda that I have them open at the start of each class through that Pear Deck, and they'll respond to that questions, and we'll take a break and I can display that on the screen. We can have a conversation for those. But ultimately for me, it's sometimes you got to let them go, but a lot of times you got to interrupt them. You got to keep them a little bit up, a little bit down, get a little bit of variety in what you do. One, it makes the class go faster for me. I know for most of them, it makes it go faster because there are those times with a lot of my kids when I give them, all right, the rest of the next 15 minutes is yours. Some of them are going to struggle with that because they're 15 minutes. All right, I'm not going to do anything for these 15 minutes because I'm tired of doing whatever we're doing. So it's that constant thing. And then the easiest thing of all is proximity. You walk around, you move around. If you come stand by some kids and have a conversation with them, hey, what you working on? What you doing? And sometimes when they're working on something else, like I had a conversation about the Super Bowl last week for almost 10 minutes with a group in the back of the room. They were not interested in what we were doing. So I kind of tried to re-steer them, and then they got me suckered into a conversation about what they were thinking about their Super Bowl and their prop bets and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, all right. Now I had to go wander off there for those kinds of things. But sometimes you just got to let the high school kids stumble and make their own decisions. Ultimately catches up to those kids, and they start to realize that as the year goes on for those. But I let them redo stuff all the time too. So that's a big challenge too. Hey, you didn't get this. You didn't get it when we did the formative assessment. You didn't get it when we did the summative assessment. Let's go back and look at it and redo it, and I can fix your grade. Because they still do worry about grades. Well, I don't. They do. So that's still a real sneaky motivator for high school kids is I can fix that for you. You just got to give me something to work with. And we'll talk about that a lot too with those small groups of kids.
I love how you said you share you have a common language in your classroom, which is the uncomfortable moments. Is that something that you talk to them about?
Yeah, some of the kids love it, some of them don't. So it's all about interruptions is what we talk about with it, and you got to dramatically and they get pretty good at it. We actually have not done as many of those this semester because, like I said, my one class is constantly interrupting everybody, so they don't need it. In my quiet class, they really struggle for that. But the idea of a uncomfortable moment is that you have to get the whole class's attention. And sometimes I tell them I'm giving them points for it. I really never do. I tell the quiet kids, hey, if you can't do it, you can't do it. I get it. But and it just breaks up that class for a moment, and particularly with my quiet class, because they get so focused on just doing, and they're learning. I know that, but they get so focused on just doing that I start to feel bored, and it's never a good thing. I tell my kids all the time, and I'm not diagnosed, but I tell them all the time that I have ADHD. So if I get bored in the classroom, we're all in trouble. So that's always our challenge is you guys got to keep me engaged so that we can all learn something together. Otherwise, we're in trouble because they'll see whenever we take a quiz and it's quiet, they laugh at me because I don't know what to do with myself. I'm like I'm walking around, nobody has any questions, so that's always a challenge for us. But that's fun, and it's just a little different thing. And I try to vary those things up all the time, get them up and moving, because I don't, like one of my more recent blog posts, I had the nice video of the monkey on the keyboard that we've all seen one time or another. I'm like, sometimes I feel like that with one class because that's all they'll do. They'll just punch on those keys. And I don't think that they're the monkey punching on the keyboard, but that's what keeps popping into my head as I'm just watching my kids just click on the keyboard to see what they can get done without really engaging with me or each other very much. So that's always the challenge, is getting them to engage in the work. And Flipgrid's been really powerful for that, as we talked about earlier, because they like watching each other speak. Although for the first time, I hadn't done this before, we watched an entire Flipgrid for the whole class in class. Usually that's a lot of time to give up when I have 30 kids. They love making videos. They don't want me to put it on the projector. And I learned that last week. All of them were so mortified that I played their Flipgrid, even though most of their classmates had already seen them individually, that I played them for the whole class in front of the screen. The one girl got up and she knew she was next. She got up and she left. And I have an open door policy. I'm like, hey, if you got to go, you go. If you got to go to the bathroom, you got to go get a drink, whatever. And the whole class saw her. They're like, she just left. And they're not supposed to tell me or ask me. I trust them enough to let them go, as long as it doesn't become a problem. And she's one of my quietest kids, and she did not even want to see herself on that screen. She does great videos. Hers was one of the best ones, but she didn't want to see herself. So she left the room and came back about a minute after her video was over. She must have had it timed out and sat back down and just went back to watching the other videos. So, but it's fun doing those kinds of things.
Oh, wow. You're so in tune with listening to you. You definitely know. You're thinking beyond the text, beyond the standards, beyond the content, like really who they are as people, as you share a similar story like that. Thank you for sharing that. I wonder.
That's always a challenge.
It is. But those are the things that make the classroom experience great for kids, when they have a teacher who sees beyond all of that and is paying attention to that and noticing, okay, now you took that as a learning opportunity to learn a little more about that student. And then to kind of reflect ourselves too about, what does that mean? Does that mean they're okay with seeing it on a small screen or watching it at different times, but up on the big screen with all of her classmates around her? That was a very different learning experience for her.
Yeah. I learned from it. I was like, okay, maybe we won't do that again, because enough of them were uncomfortable with it that I didn't completely. And again, having them uncomfortable sometimes is part of the class. I like that, but there are other things where, because it took us a whole period to watch. I think 28 of the kids actually completed it. 28 of them at a minute and a half apiece. It was the whole period we used up watching basically 28 kids say almost the same thing. The nice thing about Flipgrid is it's not a presentation, so they have a tendency to ramble a little bit more, so you get a little bit more variety than you do if you have 28 kids do a presentation, which I gave up on years ago of, all right, make a presentation, make a PowerPoint, and then you're going to present, or your group's going to present. Well, you ended up with 8 to 28 of the same thing, or if you gave them different subject areas, they were so scattered that it didn't all flow together for those. So that's really what's become powerful with some of these tech tools, is so easy to get a quick response, more than just in writing, something that they can actually, and they love Flipgrid because of the little stickers, believe it or not. Yeah. That is they don't mind talking on that, but I think it's got enough of that Snapchat feel for them that you can put all these little stickers and stuff. That is their favorite thing. come back, they're so excited because they got to put stickers all over themselves. I'm like, all right, guys, you guys are all 17 and 18, right? Okay.
Hey, I still like those stickers. Those are fun.
I do too.
About just social media in general. A lot of our kids are on it all the time, consistently talking and conversing in that way. But what Flipgrid does, and what you did in your classroom, was force them to kind of see themselves, you know, in a conversation and work on those speaking and listening skills, which a lot of people are worried about with so much technology integration. There's the benefits of learning from each other through social media, but also how sometimes a teenager might just be, you know, nose down on the phone or something. So taking the time to reflect and look at those and watch and talk about what the students did that helped them present their ideas well is another speaking and listening skill that you're touching on when you do that.
Yeah, and if you'll notice in any of my flippers, I always have in almost every section, there's a built-in turn talk to your partner. If we're not doing something the whole class,
right.
I found I have to put that in writing for them. Now, some of them still don't do it, but then that's when I'm walking around saying, hey, you guys are on step 3. I didn't hear you guys talk to each other at all yet. You know, for those, you know, you got to get them to look up and turn and talk to each other. Because my one class, they love talking to each other anyway, but my other class, they won't look at each other. They won't talk to each other. They're all nice kids. They're all friendly with each other. But when it comes to school, for whatever reason, their mindset is screen's on. I'm working. Every once in a while, one of them have their phone on the side, and they'll be, you know, all right, maybe you want to put that video game away for a little bit. You know, maybe we'll finish what we're doing here. But they just don't talk to each other. So that's always the challenge for me is one class talks too much, and the other one, same HyperDoc. One class talks way too much. They have a hard time getting it done. The other class is done in half the time because they won't talk to each other. So they miss all those opportunities of having those conversations, you know. So it's always fun to see those different personalities come into when you build this framework that's designed to be differentiated, how it comes in and how it just it's like the class. You know, I think the one class, because a couple kids are loud, they're all loud. The other class, because a couple kids are quiet, they're all quiet. You know, so it's interesting to see where those kids. I always want to follow my kids during the day to see how their personalities change with different teachers, and I never get a chance to do that. That's on my to-do list. Like, you get in a different classroom, are you a different kid? Class, do you talk more? You know, for those, you know, is it me that you're afraid of me? Am I scaring you too much? Or
there's a lot to say about group dynamics. People do change a little bit in different groups. Steve, can you talk us through your Exploring Sustainable Agriculture HyperDoc too? That's linked below so that people can just kind of hear your thinking.
Yeah, I'd love to. That's a little bit more of a content-driven one. That's a little bit more of a content-driven one. But this is one that we did with videos. I'm a big fan of videos in the classroom, as always here. So we had watched that first video on slide 2 together as a class. It was just us shifting from what we were doing in agriculture, long story short, to where we want to go. So this is something they did in groups. So each group made a copy of this. And the idea was to initially get yourself brainstorming a little bit, get them talking for those. And then as you work your way down through this, I kind of give them some tips on how to watch the videos. Like, you go down, I think it's slide 5 here. I don't have this one open in front of me for those there. Or is it slide 6? One of them's got a quick tip on speeding up. There it is, that one right there. Great tip right there on watching videos either in class or having the kids watch them is you just click that little 1.25 in a YouTube video, and a 7-minute video turns into a 4-minute video.
Oh,
and it does such a great job for you. Other than they're moving a little bit faster, you don't really they don't sound like chipmunks when you speed it up. So and most of the research says you should do that. So the idea behind this one was to stop them from doing the traditional divide and conquer. If I give them 4 videos and they're a group of 4, they're going to watch. Each one's going to watch a video, and then they're going to pretend to talk to each other about them, but they won't. So I kind of built this one with the idea that I want you watching each video at the same time. So it was really important that I was there. I tried to do this once with a sub, and it didn't work as well because they reverted to that. So I would go to each group and make sure that they were looking at why would you eat bugs at the same time. And then I asked them to take that video and then turn it into, and I'm all about making visual stuff, less text and everything, turning that into a visual summary of what that video was about. And then at the end, I gave them some bonus videos and some things like that.
So they would video?
Right, so they would watch each video, and then instead of creating a new video, which I do sometimes in some of my other HyperDocs, they created a slide to summarize that video, where I was trying to get them to use visuals like that. add-on called Unsplash. It's one of those Google Slides add-ons. And I'm always trying to, behind the scenes, teach them some tools that help them present better in all their classes. Like years ago it was Prezi, back when everybody loved Prezi for those. And then we got a little tired of Prezi for those. And then, yeah, in this one here, we got the kids then to go and share those. So if you click on one of those, you'll kind of see, not all of them are great because we kind of fly through those. You'll see what the kids were supposed to do is go through and replace all of my instructions with their pieces here. So like if you go down to the first video, and they don't always remember to delete everything, then there's a response after it, and that's the part that they were supposed to be doing together. And what I love about Google Slides is I can go in and see who was doing what, who put which pictures in, and I have conversations with the different groups about, okay, who did this image? Okay, why is it only you, Sue, who's got this one here? Did you guys not talk about or work through this one here?
Well, I can when you're talking, all the teaching happening with the lesson. And it's just like the perfect example of hearing you talk about this HyperDoc and your intentions behind it, which is that you wanted your students to not divide and conquer. That was the first thing that I heard you say, which is group work. So
that's what high school kids love. They're all about divide and conquer.
Mm-hmm. Well, you can hear the design choices that you're making as you're building your HyperDoc. So you knew that with this particular HyperDoc, your focus was watch these 4 videos, but talk in between each. Don't, like you can just hear the really intentional decisions. And I think that really speaks to the design process and being responsive to our kids. But I know a lot of times people struggle with getting going with HyperDocs because it can take a while to create them. So can you talk a little bit about just the remixing element and how like maybe you might start to create a HyperDoc with a particular focus, but going into it that it's not going to take forever because you're going to build off what you already know with a slightly different twist.
I think that is great advice. People that know me will know that I'm a little bit crazy, and I love the creation part enough that I like to look for ideas, but I'm a bit of a workaholic when it comes to that stuff. So most of my HyperDocs are mine, and I might look for some ideas in those. But when I teach people how to use HyperDocs and work through that, that is the hard part. These take time. They take time to create. They take time to get the kids to do them. It's so much easier. If you want me to create a lecture, I can find 10 lectures online that'll tell kids everything they need to know. And I know this stuff, so I just got to read it off the screen for those. That I can do in a snap, and 6 or 7 years ago, that's all I did in my classroom for the most part is I lectured. I liked the song and dance. I liked being up there waving around and, shouting at stuff and getting them to talk back to me and that kind of stuff. And sometimes I miss that, but I don't lecture more than maybe about 20 minutes a week. Maybe be up to an hour a week total if we're talking about me giving them instructions. But in terms of actual content, hey, you need to know this. Those are when we come back to them. And a lot of times it's not even like a presentation. Like we'll do Quizlet Live. And at the end we'll get, okay, these are some of the terms that you guys struggled with. All right, let's take a quick look at these and see if we can come up with some examples. And it'll be more of an impromptu lecture at that point as opposed to this. And a lot of times I can connect it back. Okay, so, hey, we didn't get this one. Here's where it is in that HyperDoc we've been working on. Let's go back and look at that and see what we didn't get out of that, or why, out of everything you read out of that article or watched in that video, you missed this piece. And then that's fun, that backwards design piece of figuring out, did I not ask the right question? That's always a challenge in HyperDocs, because I don't want to just spoon feed them the answers, but I also want to get them to the stuff they need to know. So for me, I'm constantly recreating my own HyperDocs. There's not a HyperDoc in any of the ones that I could share with you guys that if I shared with the one from last year, some of the same framework, some of the same thoughts, some of the same resources, but I've reframed it all. I'm constantly making comments on my HyperDocs in the margins and adding other notes in Google Keep and places like that to say, hey, this is what I want to do differently next time I do this one and those. And I love that creation piece. But in terms of for anybody who just wants to get started with something else, the HyperDocs community, Facebook, Google+, which we're still working on, and Twitter is amazing. I have not been in, and I've been doing this for a long time, been with any group of teachers who share, and want you to use what they have, want you to make it better. And that's what I've always wanted to do, is say, hey, I'm going to share this with you. All I ask is that if you make it better, share it back with me. And for years, I found a lot of teachers, they'll take it and they'll make it better, then they never tell me. So the HyperDocs community, which is really what's hooked me into all of this, is the fact that they'll make it better, and they'll tell you, hey, here's what I did, here's what I didn't do, here's what I liked, here's what I didn't understand for those. So that's just, to me, that's the most powerful part about this. It's not even so much the remix and the saving time, although that's great for teachers. It's the fact that you have an active group of people that are going to bounce ideas off you. They're going to want to share ideas. They're going to want to give you feedback and use your stuff, and that's kind of really cool as an educator, as opposed to a lot of times when you feel isolated. We were talking about it beforehand, the whole Teachers Pay Teachers website. And that is great. I don't begrudge those teachers making money off of those, but there's no conversations there. There's no, I buy one and I take it and I make it better. Well, I'm not going to resell it. So now it's just mine, and then where did it go? Where the HyperDoc communities for those. And if I was to rank them, I would say Facebook is where I would start just to get those conversations going. If you're looking for the templates, your guys' website is great for what's shared there. I don't get in there as much. For me, I always forget to share there for those. Google Plus is nice because I like it, because you can have nice conversations in there. Twitter is great, but it's so fast. Like, you want to go look for HyperDocs in Twitter. It's nice to search for them, but they go by so fast. And Twitter never seems to archive stuff for that long when you're searching for it. At least I struggle. Like, I've seen a HyperDoc like 6 months ago, and I remember I saw it in Twitter. I go to search for it, and I can't find it anymore. So I think Twitter it just gets lost in there sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Well, we owe you a big shout out, because we want everyone to know that Steve is the one who got started our Google Plus HyperDocs community, and he has been monitoring it. And when people submit there, he has categories for where the work is going. And like you said, it's a great place to have conversations. And we just really appreciate you for bringing that community together. I think there's close to 3,000 people in there right now. It's really big. It's really growing. And
a few months ago it was 2,000. I lost track though.
Yeah, it's growing though. And I think you're right. It's a nice place to go share and have more conversations, similar to Facebook. Facebook has had a lot of great conversations. You also touched a lot on just being a curious learner yourself. And I think that's one of the things, it sounds like, listening to you, that drives you and fuels you within your passion for educating in the most innovative ways. And it's so inspiring to listen to you talk, because we always say, like, be a designer, not an assigner. And really, Steve, you sound like such a creator and innovator every day in your classroom, really a hero in that way. And then to highlight other teachers in the sense of just having conversations. I think you're right. I think that's one of the best things we can do for each other, is have these conversations about what's working. And they're really reflective conversations, like, oh, hey, I will never do it this way again. But listening to you today, I love a couple of big takeaways around thinking about collaboration in my HyperDocs and what that's really going to look like. And what does it look like when you're teaching from it? You're actually next to the students having conversations. That's one of the benefits of it. So those things are very, very helpful. You have a couple more HyperDocs that are linked below. If you want to talk, do you want to talk through any of those?
So we hit the memes, we hit the reboot. If you wanted to open up either the aquatic ecosystems or the species classification, I'll just kind of show you that. We talked about that uncomfortable moment.
Okay.
Those types of things. And one more thing about collaborating. I'm lucky enough, and she's in the chat maybe now still. Melissa Wilson is my co-technology coordinator and an English teacher. So she helps me a ton with these HyperDocs because she writes better than I do. So that's a shout out to Melissa Wilson. Hopefully she's down there in the chat and she's sharing something out. So you can see a lot of times I start with Pear Deck, and I end with Pear Deck just for those kind of different pieces here. The vocabulary builder is a pretty cool thing. This was the actual one the first time we'd ever used it, so I had a little bit of an explanation for the kids in here on what to do with that, and I'm not going to dive too deep into that, but if you scroll down just a little bit, this is what I was talking about with the learning add-ons. So a couple of my sayings are right there. I always talk to the kids about curious engagement, okay, and those types of things here for this. But then there's some different things that we do during the day on different, I don't do this in every HyperDoc, but the uncomfortable moments, the Padlet break, give one, get one. Those are things that we kind of break in and out for these here. And this one's a little bit more content driven. As you can see, it's basically them going through and diving through a bunch of images. But the trick is, if I just give them the images and ask them to fill in the boxes like that, that's what they're going to do. And they're not going to talk to me or each other very much.
Right.
So I have those learning add-ons kind of at the beginning here to kind of get them to go through and look at this. And this was one where we were just trying to summarize the content. It was very content driven. Didn't do a lot of creation in this one. You know, we tried to build in the collaboration in those, but you can just kind of see it. For me, it's closer to a digital worksheet than some of the HyperDocs that I really love. But I always tell people there's no one way to create a HyperDoc. You have to make what works for what you're doing at that given moment in time for those. And, you know, the reflection piece here, the one thing I didn't do enough in this one that now that I'm glancing back at is you don't see as often where I actually remember to put them. And this is one I did earlier in the year, reminding them, turn and talk, you know, turn and talk for those. And usually I do that a lot more in a lot of the HyperDocs that I make here. But and this one took a couple days. This was a kind of a wrap up of our main pieces of our unit and the different pieces we were going to go through. And I tried to blend in a bunch of different tools in there just to model those different opportunities to go through and do that, some formative assessments and those types of things.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, even within the summative review, as you shared, so much thought going into how is this going to be a meaningful learning experience for my students. So
I think too, one thing that I just have to say as I'm listening to all that you've done to create and be part of that process, but to post and share on social media is that at the end of the day, I think we're trying to model that for our students. I mean, we ask our students to give each other feedback and do peer review, and we ask our students to, like, you know, be thoughtful with social media and make these choices. But as educators, like, are we really truly doing that work ourselves? And so what you're doing is living that life of, you know, being a creator and putting your work out there and being a productive member of society and making thoughtful decisions and soliciting feedback and, like, really doing the work that we invite our kids to do.
And that's what I emphasize to my kids all the time is I'm like, I shared this. And like when those teachers were getting in the flip, they're like, why are there teachers in here? Well, I'm like, well, you know, I was curious whether this was good enough. So I shared it out there in Facebook and Twitter and places like that. And teachers were looking at it. They're like, wow, really? I'm like, you know, that's why we share everything that we do, because you can get people to give you some information. And that's more than anything with the HyperDocs, the creation, the activities that go with them and all those is I'm trying to model that lifelong learner, for lack of a better, that curious lifelong learner piece that we all have. You can go to every school in the world probably, and you're going to see that somewhere in their goals. You want to build lifelong learners and those kinds of things. But then too often although it's gotten way better, but too often we don't model that all the time. Like if I'm going to lecture to you, well, that's me knowing everything and you getting filled up for those, which for me, sometimes I struggle with that idea because it's not modeling what they're going to have to be. I can give them a bunch of knowledge, but it's not truly modeling. You know, their boss is not going to lecture them and tell them everything they need to do for their project step by step. So why wouldn't the boss just do the project? So I'm like, you guys got to really work with. So I always talk to the kids all the time about, oh yeah, I did this, and you know, I shared this, and it came back and they didn't like it, so I just changed this here. So I'm always trying to talk to them too about the things that I try to do to be a better teacher. And the jury's out sometimes on whether everything I do works with them. But it's fun to constantly keep trying, and then to share that I'm trying constantly.
It's fun. It's a challenge. Challenging and thriving work. So thank you very much, Steve. It's been so enlightening to hear your insights and to hear your thinking behind the actual lessons. I know there was some good conversation happening in the chat. Is there anything we didn't go over, or any questions? Nope. Okay, we're good. Well, this has been amazing. Thank you for sharing. And thanks for being curious and persevering and reflecting with us. We've been kind of talking about being a creator ourselves in that CPR state, curious.
I love that.
And reflect. And as I'm listening to you, I feel like that's something you're modeling for your students as well. So from all three of us, we truly thank you and we appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
Yes, thank you. If you want to tune in next week, we're going to be here with Nadine, and Nadine is K2 HyperDoc creator. So anyone who wants to check out some of her work, we'll be chatting with her next week. But thanks again, Steve, and we will hopefully see you soon.
Thanks so much.